Hello and welcome to Meet the Writers. I'm Georgina Godwin. My guest today has shaped Miami's literary life for more than 4 decades. He founded the first books and bookstore in Coral Gables back in 1982, turning a tiny space into one of the most respected independent bookstores in the United States. 2 years later, he became one of the founders of what would grow into Miami Book Fair, now an 8-day multilingual celebration that brings hundreds of writers to the city every year. Alongside all of that, he's hosted the podcast, The Literary Life, and helped produce several major book-to-film adaptations. Mitchell Kaplan, welcome to Meet the Writers.
Georgina, it's great to be with you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, thank you for inviting me to Miami Book Fair. Let's begin right here in Miami Beach, where you grew up. What kind of reading culture surrounded you as a child, and who were the people or the teachers or the books that really influenced how you would grow?
Well, that's wonderful of you to ask that. I did grow up on Miami Beach in a house where my parents were big readers. And as I was growing up, a lot of my reading was geared more political or politically oriented. I grew up in the 60s and early 70s, but I also had some remarkable teachers in high school and even before that. So reading and authors and the literary life was something that was so valued that I saw writers as heroes to a large extent.
And yet you decided to study law, although eventually you found yourself teaching high school English. Tell me about that whole trajectory.
My trajectory was that I grew up on Miami Beach at a time when it was not as storied as the great South Beach of the world, where it wasn't the hippest place in the world. In fact, when I was growing up, the median age was old. And I ended up going to college out at the University of Colorado in Boulder at a very fortunate time when there was something called the Naropa Institute that had just started there. You had Allen Ginsberg and all the beats were congregating in Boulder when I was a 17-year-old kid in college. So I found myself as a freshman in college who was an English major, studying writing, but at the same time being surrounded by this culture that was there, going to see Anne Waldman on a Wednesday night, or Ginsberg was giving a reading, or W.S. Merwin. And so I was sort of imbued with the sense that literary culture was something that you could make your way in. But I didn't quite learn that until I made a lot of false starts. And my dad was a lawyer, and like English majors everywhere around the world at that time, when you graduated, you didn't know what the hell to do. So I decided to go to law school, thinking, because it was something I was familiar with. I went to a wonderful law school where I was doing some important work, but I found myself in the bookstores all over the place. And finally, I left law school, and I decided that the book business was something that I wanted to be involved in, or literary culture. Another false start was thinking maybe I'd get into publishing, and I made some inquiries into that. And then I ended up back in Miami where I didn't think I'd be. And Miami became much more interesting when I came back. And it's because it had gone to the bottom of the well. We had the Mariel boat lift. We had riots that were here. We had the beginning of the cocaine trade. South Beach and Art Deco was beginning to emerge. You found some incredible people moving down, developing some of these old rotting buildings into some very interesting things. And I felt like I was sort of watching my city remake itself. And I decided that I would open a bookstore at that point. But before I did that, I was teaching in order to make a living. But as I was teaching, I opened up my very first small little bookshop that you referred to. And so over the last 42 years, I've had a very interesting seat, something unusual probably that not everybody gets to see, to watch their city that they grew up in remake itself and then be somewhat a part of it as well. Nobody thought of Miami as having much of a literary community before we in the Miami Book Fair started. And now they do. There are writers living here. Used to be only mystery writers in Miami, even before Carl Highston, people like Charlie Williford, who wrote Miami Blues, and the pulp fiction writers that you think of when you think of cities like Miami. But now you have poets, you have fiction writers, you've got Pulitzer Prize winners, you've got Kingsley Poetry Award winners. Everyone is moving here to Miami. Not everyone, but a lot of people are moving here to Miami because they understand that the diversity that was always Miami is something that feeds them in a way that other cities don't.
So you started with that very small bookshop, but now you are in these magnificent premises. And I wonder if you could just give us a verbal tour of this. You've already taken me around the physical space. I've been so impressed by it. There's a lot of people here today, so we're not going to go and do it right now because I want people to be able to hear what you're saying. But take us on a wander around this space and describe it to us.
Well, I also am fortunate that I got to build the bookstore that I really wanted to. So we started in this small space. Across the street from that space, this building came available. We're in Coral Gables, which is part of Miami. And it's built around a courtyard. It's an historic Mediterranean-style building that has a courtyard right in the middle of it. And it has an entranceway with 3 big arches that are really gorgeous. And we have a bar there. So we have magazines and a bar when you enter the bookshop area.
And it's a really great newsstand area. I noticed lots of varieties of Monocle magazine there too.
Yes, Monocle is something we love, and we've been involved with them for a long time. But so you go, and then you can enter the bookshop from any side, since it is a U-shaped store. And when you walk in on one side, you see a floor-to-ceiling books everywhere you look. And on one of the side, our ceilings are almost 18 feet high. We have a big ladder that gets you up there. And then that is a new and notable room. We have all the new books that are out. And then you wander into one of the rooms. The rooms kind of open up for you, and you wander. It's a real browser's delight, I think, is the bookstore of my dreams, and we've done this here, I think. And you walk into one room, and it has art, architecture, design, photography. That's always been a very, very important part of what we do.
And it's probably the biggest collection of art books in the United States in a bookshop?
I don't know if it's the biggest in the United States, but certainly in the South, in terms of a bookshop, maybe south of New York, maybe. But we do a big business in art, architecture, and design because from the beginning, we were very much involved with the School of Architecture at the University of Miami and other things. And then there are artists living here and all of that. So then you wander into the back, and then we have the back end of our cafe. And then you wander to the other side, and we have everything from books in Spanish to paperback fiction to history, biography. But if you can imagine a bookstore that if you could afford to build in a Borgesian way, a bookstore that you could dream of attached to your house. That's what we have in a sense. And we have a children's section, and so there are sections. But the cool thing too is in the center of everything is a courtyard cafe where you can hang out and do your work. We have internet, and you can drink coffee, beer, wine, with a full menu that fortunately my son manages our food and beverage and all of that. So it's really a third place, like the great third places. It's what I've always wanted, a place where, after work, after home, you can come and just hang out, meet other people, and feel part of a community.
And of course, in these rooms, we're sitting at the moment in the art and architecture and design room, and the room that mirrors it on the other side, which carries fiction. There are central shelves, but they're on wheels, so you can move those, and you can have events in these spaces. In fact, you could even have 3 events running concurrently.
And we do about 400 events per year out of this one location, and mostly author events, and we also in the courtyard do music on various nights, different kinds of music. So yes, we've had those nights where we've had 3 things going at once, but we could accommodate up to 200, 250 people in one of the rooms, 100, 150 in another. It's not a big bookshop. It's relatively small. The total square footage under air conditioning is about 5,000 square feet. And with the courtyard, it brings it to about 9,000 square feet, which is not huge. So, but it has a kind of there's a sense of exploration as you go from one room to the next.
It's not your only bookstore either.
No, what happened was we opened this, and for 30 some odd years, we had one on Miami Beach where I grew up, and it was a real pleasure to have it there. But we had to close it during COVID as well. The rents got too high, and one thing after another. We would maybe open again on Miami Beach if the right thing came up. But in the meantime, we opened in an area that I used to go to as a kid. It's called Coconut Grove. It was the old kind of head shop area where you could go and buy jeans, or you could go see an art house film. And in the area of Coconut Grove, we opened a bookstore there. And then we have one in a shopping area that is a very upscale shopping area called the Bal Harbour Shops. But then we also have a bookshop in Key West that we partner with Judy Blume and her husband George Cooper. And it's fabulous being with them. They're old friends, and Judy Blume we all know her as being an amazing writer, but she and her husband are lovely, lovely people as well.
Now, alongside bookselling, you've carved out another role behind the microphone with The Literary Life with Mitch Kaplan. I know that the show's on hiatus at the moment, but you did do it for around 4 years. Tell me about doing that show, what you discovered about the writers, if there was anything really surprising, and what you loved about it.
What I really loved about it is the idea of having a conversation that you might have over the fence with a neighbor. So I would sit down with people that I knew as writers, and I would want to learn a little bit about their early influences, kind of what we're doing now, more or less. And you do it so beautifully. And the idea of just having a conversation, where it's not, and it's not a kind of academic exploration of their work. It was really getting to know the writer and what motivated the writer. So, I had some phenomenal opportunities to be able to talk to people on a very personal basis.
It feels like such a privilege, doesn't it? I love every single interview I do, and at the end of it, I feel like I've made a new friend.
Yeah, no, I feel that way with you, Georgina, already. But yes, it's talking and getting to know one another and knowing people. Look, it's what we do when we read, isn't it? It's empathy is what it ultimately is. I read fiction in order to empathize with the characters that are there, about learning something about yourself through the eyes of someone else. So we don't do that enough in this world. And the idea of being able to empathetically speak to someone and learn a little bit of their own backstory is, I think, one of the highest callings that you can have.
I couldn't agree more. Let's talk now about the origins of Miami Book Fair. So in the early 1980s, downtown Miami was struggling, and yet you and your collaborators at Miami-Dade College imagined a festival that could bring people together around books. What convinced you that the city was right for that at that time, and how did you go about doing it?
Well, having a bookshop helped because I knew what people were buying. And Miami was always underestimated. It probably still is. People thought there was not a whole lot of serious thinking or reading going on in Miami in the early 80s. But I knew different because I was selling books, and it was as sophisticated a reading audience as anywhere in the world. I mean, you name it and we were selling it. There was nobody that was, either we were selling philosophy. We were selling just about everything that was au courant in the early 80s. And so I was confident that something like that would happen. What happened was that downtown Miami was crumbling. Miami-Dade College, which is now got like 11 campuses and 160,000 students, they had a campus in downtown Miami. And the campus was, I think, their third one. It was the third campus that they had. And it was they had 3 at the time. And the vice president of that campus thought, we've got to get people to downtown Miami. And I had already started doing a little book festival in Coral Gables. There was someone else doing something somewhere else. He called us all together. And he had just come from Madrid, where they were having a book festival there. And I remember there were a couple of festivals in New York and some other places. And it was a little like those old Mickey Rooney films, like, let's do a play. And we all got together and we dreamed that we could do something that would kind of change the dynamic of how people felt about Miami. But not only that, Miami at the time, it wasn't celebrated for its diversity, but it had diversity in ways that nobody understood. We were kind of a microcosm of what America was going to become. Every city now has this kind of diversity. Nothing quite like Miami, where you have an incredible Spanish speaking community, people from other places in Latin America, Haitian community, people from the Caribbean. You had every community you could possibly imagine. So we wanted to construct a gigantic tent under which the entire community would come out and support. So from the beginning, diversity was always something that we aspired to in terms of the authors. So what we did is we married a street festival, which is where you have booths seeing books and publishers and independent authors that just want to show, with a whole program of author-related events throughout the college campus. And so this was the very first Miami Book Fair in 1984. It was 2 days, and I think we had 70 authors, and it's now grown to a week-long festival, and we have close to 500 writers that come. We have, on the weekend, we have something like 18 rooms going at once with writers of all sorts presenting, and it's quite a gathering. And the entire community comes out. And I'm very proud of the fact that, what we've been able to establish is this community-wide event that everyone takes pride in, and at the same time mirrors who we are as South Floridians and what it all means. And we try to touch every single element of the community. And now we're getting people who come from abroad or come from other states who come down. And the coolest thing is, we just had our 42nd book fair, is thinking about all those cities that came and visited us, saw what we were doing, and exported it. We exported the Miami Book Fair to all these cities. Like LA has a book fair, like Portland has a book fair, San Francisco has, and so they all came and looked at our fair. And I feel very proud of the fact that they do that. I remember when two women came from Edinburgh. I mean, there was the Fringe Festival, but they were adding a book component to it. And sometime in the 80s, these two women came and spent time with us. And so, we were onto something. And I think it was out of a kind of youthful exuberance that we said, yeah, let's do it here. And we had the backing of Eduardo Padron, who was the president of the college. And then he became the president of the entire college and had all kinds of connections. And ironically, he retired. The woman who's the president now was the president of that campus where we're doing it. And she grew up with the book fair. So she was doing our logistics and all that. Now she runs the entire college. So we have this changing of the guard, but it's generational. And it makes me feel like 40 years from now it may still be going on, which I would love to see happen.
How is it funded?
It's funded through community support. We had a gala. We have some incredible donors. And the college, it's a program of the college as well. So, educational funding is tough these days. So we're out raising money from a whole bunch of people that we can.
I mean, it was incredible for me. You talked about Edinburgh, and when I was in Edinburgh recently, I met for the first time Susan Choi, and then of course saw her again, and old friends like Katie Kitamura, all of course on the Booker shortlist.
Right.
Saw them all again at the Booker dinner in London, and then suddenly we're here in Miami, and the same group of people is there, and it's just wonderful to come across all of these people who, have been influenced by something that you and others have created, and that brings us all together in various parts of the world.
Right. And one of the things that we do, which I'm very proud of as well, is we've always invited the long list. So even before we know who's shortlisted or who wins, of the National Book Awards that are given. So we had over 35 writers who were acknowledged to be part of the long list of the National Book Awards. And so, we try to bring into Miami the most interesting writers that we can, both commercial as well as literary, nonfiction, fiction. We had a panel of really interesting women talking about menopause. We had a panel on anti-Semitism. We had I mean, we had all kinds of stuff going on.
I thought the program was astonishing, and I mean, just from Edwidge Dentacat to all sorts of extraordinary Carl Harrison, as you already mentioned, but all of these wonderful, wonderful writers. Molly John Fast. It was great to meet her, and then I also thought it was incredibly sensitively put together. So a panel that I did with my brother Peter Godwin, but it also had Rich Benjamin on it. It also had another couple of people on it whose books were absolutely bang on. The three of them were writing about almost exactly the same thing, about the crumbling of a nationhood, about families going through trauma, but all in different countries. And it just struck me that whoever had put it together, and I'm going to assume it was you, had read deeply and had thought deeply and had considered deeply whilst doing all of this.
You know, I don't do it all. We have a really great team of people. But in the beginning, I sort of did it all. There wasn't a whole lot of us. But over the years, there have been people who've worked closely with me on it, who are now in positions where I'm able to hand off some of it. But my role is still one of kind of helping to shape the entire program. And I should say that what we do, and what's from the beginning, is do that close looking at these panels and making sure the whole notion of the panels, they're not moderated panels necessarily, although yours was. We want to say to people, look, here's a writer that you might have come for, but here's another one that you may not have heard of, but you should hear about, and put them together so that like-minded readers would understand that one book is about a whole nother country, and here's another book about a different country, and you might want to explore that one if you came for the other one. It's kind of audience development as well.
I'd love you to talk about the freedom work, those public gatherings and marches from the Coral Gables Congregational Church to the store. What's that all about?
So we started a foundation called the Books and Books Literary Foundation. And the idea behind it is, one is to develop community, two is to help develop young readers, put books in the hands of people who have a hard time getting them for a number of reasons. And the last thing is to make sure that we have the freedom to read, which unfortunately, I know it's hard for listeners everywhere to get it, particularly if you're not in the United States right now, but censorship is afoot. And the state of Florida and the state of Texas are two of the worst censored states around. So as part of our foundation, we created this freedom loose group of organizations in South Florida that are working to make sure that we continue to have the freedom to read. And that's FREADOM. And it's been great. And so there's Banned Books Week. And during that week, organizations, libraries, bookstores, all kinds of organizations highlight that week and highlight the fact that there's still book banning going on. And so what we did in the beginning of one week, one of the Banned Books Week, we had the Freedom Coalition do a march from an amazing church that we work with, a congregational church that calls themselves a sanctuary for banned books. And we had a march going from that church to the bookshop, where we then had all these groups set up tables and show the community that there are ways that they can fight against book banning in one way or another.
I mean, the way that you're involved with this community is extraordinary, because I want to talk now about your film work. That's Mitchell Kaplan Company. You've done The Man Who Invented Christmas, The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, All the Bright Places, Let Him Go. What drew you to producing movies, and what does that medium allow you to explore that everything else you do doesn't?
You know, I think early in my life as an English major, I thought maybe I would write. And I realized I don't have the patience nor the talent to write. What I discovered in the process of opening a bookshop and creating spaces, I have this kind of producer's gene where I get such joy out of bringing books and space and community in a literary sense, and I've always loved film. So that producer's gene, married with my love of books, made me get involved with bringing books to film. So we started a film adaptation production company with my partner Paula Mazer, and Paula knows what she's doing. I'm a bookseller. She's been a filmmaker her whole life. She lives in Los Angeles. I live in Miami. And we find books that have both commercial and literary appeal that could have very strong story and try to get them made. And I've learned, I mean, it's like learning a whole new muscle in the world of film. And I've, now studied it, and I read all the trades. And, you know, it's funny. When I started the film company, my wife said to me, let me get this straight. Books, you start a bookstore, film, and a restaurant. What are you, nuts? And it's true. I mean, those three things are probably three of the hardest things to make your way in. But I have so enjoyed my journey, and I'm so proud. I'm very proud of the films we've done. They are, they touch you. They're about story. They're very, very accessible, and they're based on some really great books. And we've done a lot of filming and a lot of work in the UK, actually. We filmed The Man Who Invented Christmas was in Dublin. Dublin is London, and it's about Charles Dickens in the writing of A Christmas Carol. And it's a great story. It's got Dan Stevens in it. It's got Jonathan Pryce. It's got every Dickens scholar who's also an actor in it as well. Yeah. So it's a wonderful, I actually really enjoy the process as well.
I wonder, sort of looking at it from a lifetime of experience, presenting thousands of writers in public in various forms, whether it's selling their books or getting their films made or doing them at the book fair. What makes an author or a book a hit?
Boy, if I had the solid answer to that, it would be really easy for me to make my way in the world. But ultimately, what makes a book work, and it's what I tell aspiring writers, is the book itself. It's very hard to manufacture an audience for a book because it's a commitment when you buy a book. And what I find is word of mouth is the thing that really solidifies a readership. It's got to be a good book, and that doesn't mean it has to be a literary book or this or that, or it can't be genre related. But if it's going to be a mystery book, it has to be a really good mystery. You have to be speaking to an audience of some sort, and that's the same with a film. And I think that it's very hard. It's hard to define. It's not genre. People come in and say, how are mysteries doing? Should I write a mystery? How are romances doing? And I go, just write a book. Write a really good book. Tell your story. Make sure that your voice, it's a book that is true to itself in terms of its voice as well.
You have given Miami something extraordinary, a literary culture that people around the world recognize. They come here to learn from it. And after 40 years, I wonder what still excites you about the next chapter for Books and Books, for the fair, for the readers, for the people that you touch?
It's a difficult question to answer, other than, to me, what I look forward to is being a very good elder, as I've been here for 40 some odd years. It's how to make sure that the next generation understands the shoulders that they stand on. And that becomes what I want to make sure happens. I mean, I have seen so many remarkable writers come through the store in the last 40 years, and many of them are no longer being read. And what I do with younger people is put a book in their hand and say, yeah, you may be interested in this, even though you came in for the new romantasy book. Try the diaries of so-and-so. And so that becomes what I see my role being. But I also want to make sure that there is the next generation of booksellers, next generation of writers, and making sure that we as a bookstore or as a literary foundation or as a book fair, that we adapt to those new audiences that are coming up. There's been a lot of talk about the death of reading. I don't see that. I think what's happening is people are reading and experiencing books in different ways. Audiobooks, for instance, are becoming huge right now. Think about all the podcasts that are out there and all of that. But at the same time, writers of different nationalities, different ethnicities, there are more opportunities to be reading about different cultures and from different points of view than ever before. And I think those voices are now out there. And what I'd like to make sure happens is that literary culture accommodates those voices and then honors those voices, and that older people like me doing it for so long don't become stuck in what we've always wanted to do. And so I hope the book fair begins to expand and change and morph, and the bookstore does the very same thing, understanding that new generations are coming up. And I think, to the way I look at it is books will always be here. I've lived through the death of books for the last 40 years in so many different periods of time, that I am convinced that until narratives change the way they're told, the idea of a beginning, middle, and an end will always call for a book, something between covers.
Mitchell Kaplan, an absolute privilege and honour to speak to you on Meet the Writers.
If I could do a podcast like you do, I would continue to do them. But so I thank you for inviting me on.
You've been listening to Meet the Writers. Thanks also to my producer, Steph Chungu. And you can hear this programme again and indeed have access to our entire archive wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.